Every time a Tomahawk missile is fired, a company makes about $2 million. Think about that. In the 60 seconds it took for that missile to reach its target, someone, somewhere, just booked a profit that could buy a luxury mansion. We often think of war as a drain on a nation's wealth. For the taxpayer it is, but for a select group of companies, war and even the mere threat of it is the most reliable business model ever devised. These are the titans of the American defense industrial base. They don't just build weapons. They built a system where they literally cannot lose money. But how did we get here? How did a nation that once feared standing armies become the world's largest arms dealer? And how did these companies turn your tax dollars into high-tech lethality while keeping their shareholders very, very happy? To understand the business of bullets, you have to go back to a time when the arsenal of democracy was just a desperate idea. Before 1940, the American military was, well, it was tiny. It was ranked 18th in the world, smaller than Portugal's. If you needed a tank, you didn't call a defense contractor. You called a government-owned arsenal. Private companies didn't want to make weapons. There was no consistent money in it. Then came World War II. The U.S. government realized it couldn't win a global war using only state-run factories. They needed the scale of Detroit and the innovation of Silicon Valley before it was called that. So, they made the private sector an offer they couldn't refuse. They introduced something called the cost-plus contract graphic. A simple formula appears on screen. Cost of production plus guaranteed profit equals government payment. In a normal business, if it costs you $10 to make a widget and you sell it for $12, you make $2. But if your costs go up to $11, your profit shrinks. Under Cost Plus, the government said, whatever it costs you to build this bomber, we will pay it plus a guaranteed 7% profit on top. Suddenly, being inefficient didn't hurt your bottom line. In fact, the more expensive the project became, the more total profit you took home. This single policy shifted the DNA of American industry. Companies like Ford and General Motors didn't just help win the war, they realized that the government was the ultimate whale of a customer, one who never goes bankrupt and always pays its bills. Fast forward to 1993. The Cold War is over. The Soviet Union has collapsed. The peace dividend is here, and the Pentagon's budget is getting slashed. For weapon companies, this was an existential crisis. If there's no big enemy, why do we need thousands of new tanks? In what historians now call the Last Supper, Deputy Secretary of Defense William Perry invited the CEOs of the top defense firms to a dinner. He looked them in the eye and told them, "We're not going to have enough money to keep all of you alive. You need to start merging. You will go under." What happened next was a corporate feeding frenzy. Before the 1990s, there were over 50 major aerospace and defense firms. Today, 5 primes dominate almost everything. Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, now RTX, Northrop Grumman, and General Dynamics. These aren't just companies anymore. They are systems integrators. They are so big and so deeply embedded in the U.S. infrastructure that they are essentially too big to fail. If Lockheed Martin went bankrupt tomorrow, the U.S. Air Force would effectively cease to function. That is leverage. And leverage is how you make money. So, how do they actually turn a profit today? It's more complex than just selling a product. It's about the life cycle. The government often pays these companies billions just to try and build something. Take the F-35 Lightning II. It's the most expensive weapons program in history. Projected to cost over $1.7 trillion over its lifetime. A huge chunk of that money was spent before the first plane even took off. The beauty of this for the company. Even if the project is delayed or over budget, which they almost always are, the government has already sunk so much cost into it that they can walk away. In the defense world, the razor is the jet, and the blades are the spare parts and maintenance. When Lockheed sells an F-16 to a foreign country or the Pentagon, that's just the down payment. These machines are so complex that only the original manufacturer has the proprietary software and specialized tools to fix them. Over 30 years, a company often makes 3 to 4 times more money maintaining a weapon than they did selling it in the first place. You aren't just buying a plane. You're signing a 30-year subscription service to that company's expertise. The U.S. government acts as the world's most powerful middleman. Through the FMS program, the Pentagon helps prime contractors sell their gear to allies like Poland, Saudi Arabia, or Japan. This is a win-win for the companies. The U.S. government handles the diplomatic red tape. The companies get economies of scale. The more F-35s they sell to the world, the cheaper it becomes for them to produce each unit, padding their margins even further. You might be wondering, if these projects are always late and over budget, why doesn't the government just fire them? This is where we get into the iron triangle. Congress holds the purse strings. Defense contractors are masters of political engineering. They don't build a whole tank in one city. They spread the subcontracts across 40 different states and 300 different congressional districts. If a congressman tries to cut the budget for a failing weapon, the company says, fine. That means 500 jobs lost in your district. No politician wants to lose an election over killing jobs. The Pentagon wants the best tech. They rely on these companies for the edge in combat. The revolving door, this is the secret sauce. Roughly 80% of top-ranking generals and admirals who retire go on to work as board members or consultants for these very same defense companies. When the guy buying the weapons today knows he might be working for the company selling them tomorrow, well, the negotiations tend to get a little friendlier. The powerful insight, the business of deterrence. We often criticize these companies for profiteering from war, and while the ethics are a valid debate, next, we have to look at the cold, hard logic of the system. The American weapon company's true product isn't actually war. It's deterrence. What a traditional market, you want people to use your product so they buy more? If you sell soap, you want people to wash. If you sell cars, you want people to drive. But in the high-end defense world, the goal is often for the product to never be used. A nuclear-powered aircraft carrier is most successful when it sits in an ocean and prevents a war just by existing. This creates a strange economic paradox. The U.S. spends nearly $900 billion a year on defense, not because we are constantly at war, but to maintain a technological gap so wide that no one dares to start one. The business of these companies is maintaining that gap. They sell the guarantee that if a conflict starts, the U.S. will have the unfair advantage. And in the world of geopolitics, an unfair advantage is the most valuable commodity on Earth. Conclusion. The takeaway in 1961, President Dwight D. Eisenhower, five-star general who led the Allied forces in World War II, gave a famous farewell address. He warned us to guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex. He wasn't saying we didn't need weapons. He was saying that once you build a massive engine of profit centered around weaponry, that engine starts to develop a mind of its own. It needs to be fed. Today, these companies are no longer just manufacturers. They are the architects of global security. They provide the tools that protect democracies, but they also require a perpetual state of readiness to stay profitable. The next time you see a headline about a new defense contract or a missile test, look past the explosion. Look at the ledger. Because in the business of defense, the goal isn't just to win the war, it's to make sure the arsenal is always open for business. What do you think? Is the Iron Triangle a necessary evil for national security, or is it a system in desperate need of a reboot? Let us know in the comments below. If you want to see how the other side does it, click here to watch our video on how the Soviet Union's military industry actually caused its collapse. Would you like me to create a detailed storyboard for the visual segments mentioned in this script? Or perhaps a breakdown of the specific financial data for the top 5 primes to add as an appendix?